Welcome to 216, a link to the Past Randomizer podcast. I am your host, Fear Agent. Today on the show, we've got PH. Just looking at the length of the episode, you're going to realize we had a pretty good time talking. So I'm going to keep the intro as short as I can because we do go a little long. I just want to touch on a couple of things. Sinek is back. That's great. He posted in the Tark Discord, and I'm just going to read it off here real quick. He says, "Good morning. I just want to say that I've had a long week to think about everything, what my position in the community should be, and what my next steps should be. After joining the server again and catching up on what has happened, I think what eventually occurred regarding the formation of this server, speaking of Tark, and the setup of a new community-operated council is probably the best outcome, even though the process of getting here ended up being way messier than what it should have been. That's my fault, as I should have foreseen this happening and worked to make this transition period less abrupt than it ended up being. I wish this new group the best of luck. If there's anything you need from me, especially on the technical front, to make this group a success, please don't hesitate to slide into my DMs and ask. If you need anything from Sahabot to make this project successful, I'm here to help make it happen. Thanks again for your patience with me, Sinek." Let me address a couple of things. One, Sinek's the best. I'm so glad that he's able to find his spot in the community, even if it was not to come back. I think he had put enough time in that we didn't deserve what he gave us. He did so much work for us, really like thankless work too. A lot of behind the scenes stuff that just makes everyone's lives so much easier. So if he was to just pack it up, he deserves it. He could do that without worry or concern. He's a selfless dude and he puts it on himself. Sinek had too much on his plate. And this can happen to people with really good intentions, is they just do too much. Sinek had taken on way too much. You know, not only was he doing the technical stuff, but he was the face of the main admins, and he's like in every server, doing work for all the different tournaments, making sure Sahabot runs, trying to oversee the council. It's just too much for one person, especially as a volunteer. Him trying to take some of the blame is, again, what makes Sinek such a good guy. He's trying to shoulder it, and he shouldn't have foreseen it. Like, a lot of people saw things kind of crumbling, or the pieces that were kind of falling out of place. But to say you should have foreseen it happening is just not right. So I hope he can take some relief in knowing that he doesn't need to shoulder the blame. Glad to have him back. It's cool that he's letting us use Sahabot. And I really hope that he's able to find and settle into the spot that he wants to be in, which I think is the bot stuff. I think he enjoys doing that. Taking away some of that added pressure of things that he doesn't enjoy doing, especially overseeing the council. It's good that he doesn't have to carry that at all. And so Sinek's back. Tark is going to be voting on some admins. It looks like they're going to make it a public vote. That should be good. See what happens there. The other big announcement is the League Season 6. Not a huge amount of changes, and rightfully so. I mean, they've established what they're doing, so there doesn't need to be a lot of change season to season. Though the big change is always the modes, and it's usually not even that big of a change. There's certain modes that are, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but pretty much locked in. Co-op AD, week 1, that's locked in. We're back with that. Week 2, Kaz Boots. Another safe bet. They're bringing back cross keys for week number 6. This time they're doing the 100% locations cross keys that the cross keys tournament is using. That makes a lot of sense. You could pretty much lock that one in. Co-op Randomizer Boots for week 7. That's been a staple for like 3 seasons, maybe even 4 seasons now. Those 4 you could lock in. So there's just 3 modes that are always kind of up in the air. Last year we had co-op Retrance. Spoiler, pilot key sanity was gone. Well, Retrance is gone. Spoiler, pilot key sanity is back. I know a lot of people are going to be excited about that one. That's cool. The other 2 modes are always kind of up in the air when it comes to the regular season. And this is where things can kind of get a little hairy, but they brought back 80 keys. So that's a big one. It's a little bit different though. It's not a traditional 80 keys. It doesn't have an all dungeons goal. The goal is actually defeat Ganon, but it does have the GT big key on the pedestal, which means you're required to get all 3 pendants to climb GT. What's the purpose of that? You don't have to do AGA. AGA is not required in the goal anymore. It might be required in the seed, but that means not everyone has to do AGA. So it's very similar to what we originally had for Fat Keys, which was you had to defeat AGA 1, but we just gave you the AGA 1 keys. This is something similar along the lines. So we called that Fad Keys. They changed that for the main tournament this year by putting the GT big key in GT. They're calling this one AAD keys. Almost 80 keys? I'm not sure. All right, so week 5, what is this mode? It is Champions Ganon Hunt. It's an open 2-3 Ganon Hunt, which means there are 3 Triforce pieces and you need 2 of them to kill Ganon. It's a 5 GT, which means you need 5 crystals to get into Ganon's tower. It has Assured Swords, Starting Boots, and Big Key Shuffle. The GT Big Key is not even in the game. The 3 Triforce pieces are at the pedestal, at the Pyramid Fairy, and in the GT basement. I believe this was a ladder mode. So you need to figure out, how do I get 2 of those 3 pieces? Either one from the pedestal by defeating all the pendants, one from the Pyramid Fairy by defeating the 5-6 crystals, or the GT basement, which just requires you collecting 5 crystals. I have no idea if this is a good mode or not, but it's interesting and it's not swordless. It's an interesting mode. I don't know how good it is to race. I have no idea how it went on the ladder. I'm guessing it went okay because the league brought it in. I did ask in the Discord if the admins could provide any sort of insight as to why they picked this mode. Andrasi, one of the admins, replied saying, quote, "We wanted to do a Ganon hunt because it's a new goal introduced in the latest release that hasn't been featured competitively yet, apart from the Patreon party in the current ladder season. After looking through the existing Triforce Hunt modes, example, regular open Triforce Hunt, Gold Rush, Ambrosia 1, we thought Champions Hunt was the best one to convert to a Ganon Hunt." Okay, seems fair. I gotta say, they nailed it. I think they knocked it out of the park with the modes for the regular season. So kudos to them. It's easy to beat them up when they're bad, like I did a bit last year. Gonna give them all the praise. They did an awesome job. Now, the biggest change with the league isn't in the regular season, it is in the playoffs. 1, pendants no longer matter. In the past 5 seasons, you had to determine a wisdom, power, and courage pendant, and that would determine who you played in the playoffs. No longer have to do that. Why? Because all modes in the playoffs are now co-op, and now it's a best of 3 as opposed to a best of 5. So what happens? So the higher seeded team chooses the mode based on the 4 choices that they have. I'll go over those in a second, and 2 players from their team to race. Then the lower seed picks the 2 players from their team to race. That's game 1. Game 2, the lower seed chooses one of the modes that wasn't picked for game 1. They send out their 2 players, and then the higher seed sends out their 2 players, and they play. Then if a game 3 happens, the higher seed chooses one of the 2 remaining modes, and who's playing is determined on who hasn't played yet. So basically, if it goes to game 3, all members of your team will have raced twice, which was the same thing basically that we did last year with the co-op Retrance game 5. All co-op. I love this. So you have 2 weeks to complete 3 co-op games at most. What are the modes? Co-op Retrance. So not in the regular season, but back in the playoffs. Love it. Co-op AD, the classic. Co-op Randomizer Boots, same mode as week 7. And the 4th option, Spoiler Pilot Key Sanity. It is in the playoffs. They did it. I love this. I wish I had thought of it. Excellent job. I'm excited for these playoffs. League Season 6 looks to be its best. So good job, everyone over there at the league, for putting this together. Really excited. Registration is opening Sunday, August 13th and closes the 27th. And then the regular season kicks off September 18th. So still a ways away, but super exciting. Okay, let's get to the show. PH is on the show. We talk a lot. PH is one of my favorite people, and we kind of go all over the place. Lots of MSU talk, sports talk, RPG talk. It's all there. So here it is, my interview with PH. Super excited to have PH on the show today. Dude, it feels like you came out of nowhere and just sort of made a name for yourself really quickly. And it was almost just like, oh yeah, here's PH. And then you're just kind of like everywhere. And I've had the pleasure of like hanging out in your streams, and you're such a good dude. I knew like almost immediately upon meeting you, like, I got to get this guy on the show. Sorry it took so long, but I'm super glad you're here, dude.
Oh my, I almost can't express how happy I am to be doing this with you, mostly because basically everyone that you talk to are like people that I have tremendous respect for. I love hearing everyone's stories and what you've done with it. So I'm just really thrilled to get a chance to chat. And also, like you are, and I say this quite literally, substantially responsible for the fact that I play rando.
Well, how so? Like, did you see a stream of mine or something, or the podcast, or?
Well, no, it's believe it or not, it was the Breath of the Wild MSU.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I didn't really know MSUs were a thing. I'm sure we'll talk about this. I don't want to like dive into much.
The show goes anywhere we want it to go. So let's just dive into it. I'm cool.
I found out about rando and stuff, but at one time I was getting back around to it for whatever reason, and I watched an Andy stream, and it was the Breath of the Wild music, and it was like, I don't know what you've probably seen when I'm in like your stream or other people's streams. The music that plays is always like really hits me really hard, and that just like it flipped like a switch in my brain, and I was literally I have to do this, and that was actually kind of one of the moments was basically hearing like the music choices and the songs and just having the different soundtrack. Obviously, A Link to the Past vanilla music is amazing, but the fact that you could do these other music packs was like, I don't know, just something about it like gave me an impetus to seek it out in a way that I didn't think was going to happen. So it was really cool.
One of the things that I see whenever I come to your stream is you have which MSU is playing and the creator of the MSU right on screen. So I think that's really cool because a lot of times you'll hear an MSU and like, what is this? And I don't know. I really think there's an art to making the MSU packs. Like there's the technical side of doing all the tracks and loops and stuff, but picking the right songs is so important to making an MSU, and having the right tracks at the right time. Like anyone can make an MSU. Like someone else could have made the Breath of the Wild MSU, but I take pride in like the choice that I made for actually both of the Breath of the Wild MSUs I made.
Dude, you absolutely should. It's fantastic. It's still one of my favorite, especially sometimes, if I'm doing something like late at night or if I'm trying to like decompress, that's like one of my favorite ones because I think they're so well selected. And I've done a couple of MSUs, and I don't think I'm like super good at it. I hope I'm not super bad at it, but I couldn't agree with you more that the most challenging but most important component isn't really like picking the loops or anything like that. Is this song the right song, and the people who are really good at it? And there are some amazing creators, and that's actually really wise because I was like, look, obviously the people who made the music, that's an incredible feat on their part, but it is a legitimate, significant amount of work to take the time to pick all the tracks, put everything together, and then release that for people to download and enjoy.
100%. I mean, like Moogle Charm is like the king, in my opinion. Like he obviously has got the MSU Studio, Discord, and everything. But that dude, I feel like, has his finger on the pulse of what a track should be or where a track should land in the game. A great example is the what is it? Gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name of the game. Cadence. No, it's not the Cadence of Hyrule. What's the one that was before that?
Right. Oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on it too.
I can't remember the name of the game. All the people that made Cadence of Hyrule put a game out before that had nothing to do with.
Like I can even see like the character, the girl with the shovel.
Whatever the name. There was an MSU that someone made, and I don't know who made it. It didn't work. The MSU wasn't really used by a lot of people, and the person. I don't know who they are. I don't want to disparage them at all, but they just didn't have it. And Moogle put the pack out and remade it and just had the perfect mix. And that was like one of my most used packs that I was using towards the end of my run there. And that's kind of the example of like, man, that's really how to pick it. I'm not saying I'm totally 100% great at it because I actually relied on Moogle a lot to like help me out. But
see, that's the trick. That was the you actually had. This was a tool assisted or a Moogle assisted.
Totally, MSU. Yeah, that's like the NFL MSU. If you get hold of that one, if you're a fan of the NFL, like I am.
Oh, dude, that's such a good one. All those old NFL films music. Oh,
no, I put it together and it just wasn't clicking right. It just was something was missing from it. So I gave it to Moogle and he fixed it, added a couple tracks, moved things, a bunch of things around, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, this pack is legit.
It's amazing. And also it also speaks to there's so many unbelievably like talented and kind of giving and generous people in the community. I mean, Mughal, like you say, he's an amazing example, not just with the MSUs he does, but helping you out. And MSU.studio as a whole is just on top of the fact, right, that we have the primary packs, which correct me, I think Marith manages, right?
For like the restreams and stuff.
Yeah, like all that stuff. There's so much work that people put into it and help oversee, and it's really it's super. That's honestly what's kept me in the community, is the fact that the game is fun. I really enjoy playing it, but it's everything around it. It's all the people who give themselves to it. Really drives a lot of the value, and a lot of the enjoyment that I get is because there's just so many cool individuals.
Yeah.
216 is a great example of that.
So what are some of the other MSU packs that you're a big fan of, or creators?
Oh gosh. So it kind of depends. I'm a big fan of, for example, like Shovel Knight, which I believe is Trey Spire put that one together. I love that one. I'm trying to get like kind of pumped up. Chimo's Celeste pack is awesome. That soundtrack in general is just like, that's one of the few like video game soundtracks I just have, that I listen. I try not to inject my video gameness too much into my regular life outside of like the, like if I'm in a car, I don't want other people to have to listen to video game music if they don't like it. Mm-hmm. But that one, I'm like, I don't care. You're listening to this song. It's too good.
Crypto the Necrodancer is the name of that pack, by the way, in the game.
Oh my gosh. I was trying to think. I was like tweeting something. No, that's not right.
People are probably yelling at us as they're listening to this. Like, come on, you know what it is. Yeah, that pack is legit.
No, good call. Yeah. Google's over there. Fear. I believed in you.
I know. Have you used structural mics? It's the Commodore 64 Bangers pack.
I have. And so that is I require, when I put that, it has to be in all caps because they are bangers.
It is.
That one's really
so
good.
Yeah.
MSU is also really high quality. The one we rolled out recently. That one's great. Yeah, I mean, I could honestly just sit here and list a whole bunch of the ones I have right now. A lot of JJo 36s. Landian's got Hack. I'm a big fan of recently. I thought he did a great job with that. But that's the problem, right? Is you start listing stuff and you're like, well, I'm gonna miss other people's that I love too, and that's why I always hesitate a little bit, only because it's like, gosh, in the moment you don't think of something, and then 20 minutes later you're like, oh, I should have said such and such.
Anytime you think of an MSU pack you want to shout out, no matter what we're talking about, just shout it out in the middle of the thing, and we'll give them the proper due.
So we'll break it up. We'll get to like, and then I'll a little pause moment. Okay, well, this one.
So as far as gaming, obviously you love gaming, especially if you're listening to gaming music. What did you grow up playing? What was your like gaming history? Were you gaming a lot as a kid?
I was. So it's really funny because I was trying to think about it a little bit, but like, so the actual first kind of game that I played, this is really, most of my stories, I try to make myself look as silly as possible because I think that's always the best. But so my parents, this is, I think you and I are pretty close. So I grew up in the 80s, and my folks had an old, I can't remember if it was a 286 or a 386. I think it was a 286, like in the later 80s. And my dad had DOS on it, and my dad so my father is a surgeon, and he got this program that was like a game, but was for like, it was like some very, very kind of, I think probably for the time, advanced kind of like surgery emulation thing or something. I somehow got my hands on it, and the number of poor people that I killed in that game, oh my god, they would have revoked my license really quickly. But that was
it like Operation, like a digital operation?
Yeah, exactly, like something where you'd pull it up. It was like kind of impressive. I was trying to see if I could find it because it seemed like it would be pretty advanced for the time, but it was literally, it had like an image of like, a person's like chest, and you had like, you could pick like a scalpel or some of the tools that would hold the like the cavity open and stuff, and it was like really, again, this is like going back 30 plus years, so it's pretty impressive that they had it at the time, but it wasn't very good, and that, I'm sure that's the reason why I was really bad at it. It wasn't actually because I
it wasn't bad kid, yeah, for sure.
But so I got into that, and my parents saw that, and again, so I was like, they were like, oh, so okay, it's flash forward, I forget, it's like a couple years later, and they're like, we're gonna get you a system for your birthday. And I was super excited. And like, what system do you want? Do you want a Sega Genesis or a Super Nintendo? So this is now, those are both out. And I said, this is a Jesse from earlier too. I insisted on a TurboGrafx 16. Oh, geez. I could have had a Genesis. I could have had an SNES. I wanted a TurboGrafx. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe I saw like some ad on a.
I get it. I understand it because it was like unique and it was like not everyone had it. And it looked like even more advanced than what like Nintendo and Sega was doing. Obviously, it's not 100% true, but they did a good job of like creating a mystique for that.
And it was cool, man. I loved. Honestly, there were some really, really, really horrible games, but there were some really good games. And the system itself, I will say, the one thing that was actually amazing was the Turbo Express, which was the handheld, actually played the same games as the regular TurboGrafx 16, which was super cool. So you could take the game, like, you know, you get in a car and do whatever, like you can take the game with you. The only problem is the Turbo Express used 8 AA batteries and went through them in like 45 minutes. Of course, it was trying to be as, you know, probably some relatively similar degree of power plus the screen. So it just destroy, like you couldn't play it for very long, but I always thought that was super cool.
That is really cool. I didn't know that. So you're playing TurboGrafx. Do you get into the other stuff? Do you get into Nintendo? Are you playing with your friends?
Eventually, I got into. So my best friend growing up lived right down the street from me. Had a Sega Genesis, so I got really into games on there. Because we would play co-op games. That's like I think the reason why I really like watching video games now is because back then, you know, not every game was 2-player, and so like we would do RPGs and we would trade off. And I would actually a lot of the time really enjoy watching him play. Almost as much or more than doing whatever I could to screw up whatever good he had done. Like we would like trade off responsibilities. Like I would do all of the, so like one of the MSUs that I actually did because I had such an affinity for this game was Shining Force, because we played Shining Force together when I was growing up, and he would always do all the battles and I would do the character management, you know, all the like kind of equipment allocation and everything. So that was super fun. And like a few years later, my parents were kind enough to give me a second chance, and I got a Super Nintendo. That was transformational, and like just everything I played on that was amazing. That console, I don't want to be like I'm old and things back in the day were better, but like it felt like every game I played on that was like incredible. And I don't know that I felt that same hit rate. And it's probably because I was, 12 at the time or whatever, 10. But it was good.
I think partially, yeah, I think that's true. But I do think the Super Nintendo hit hard. I think it was peak performance for a lot of series. Like, I mean, Super Mario World is arguably the best Mario game. Link to the Past is arguably the best Zelda game. Like, and the list goes on and on. Like Super Metroid is arguably the best Metroid game.
I love that.
That's just three of like the heaviest hitters, and you could kind of go down the line with all the stuff that the Super Nintendo was doing.
And even some of the I've talked with like Shady Force about because he did I'm gonna try and tie as many things as I can to different MSUs here, but there's the Super Soccer MSU, which is like a really random but like super fun soccer game that you play from behind. The number of hours that you put into these random titles, and then you look back and you're like, wait, did I really spend like 40 hours, 50 hours so that I could use that to win the World Cup?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Absolutely.
That's hilarious. Did you continue with the Nintendo path, or did you kind of branch out as more and more consoles?
Mostly Nintendo. So I got an N64. That's where I got Ocarina of Time, which I will admit was the first Zelda that I actually owned. I didn't. So that's the thing. Yeah.
Oh.
So I have a question for you, because I think you and I are kind of the same age. Do you remember ever going into a hotel room and they had like video games that you could like push to your TV like pay-per-view?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was actually the only time that I played Link to the Past as a kid. I don't remember when it was, but we were on like a vacation, and I requested, my parents wanted some free time. Like, thank God this has video games so we can leave our kid. And I got that game, and I never got past Escape. That was it. That was the furthest I got in Link to the Past. I don't even know how long I tried to figure it out and couldn't. I probably never figured out how to push the thread.
Sure. It's complicated, especially as a kid. Not as complicated as Zelda 1, but I have a similar story where we had at our school like a fair, like a business fair, where it's like the 7th grade, it was middle school, and 7th grade was the highest grade. And towards the end of the year, they would have like a fair where the kids would try to run their own business, basically.
Oh, wow. That's
and
awesome.
Everyone would
I love
come.
that.
Yeah, it was really, really neat. And one of the like booths was someone had their Super Nintendo, and you could rent the game and play it. It was hooked up to a TV, and you could rent time to play a game. And I didn't have a Super Nintendo, so I was like, yes, please. And it was probably like a quarter for like 10 minutes or something. I can't really remember. But Link to the Past was there. And was my first opportunity to play it, to even see really what it was. And the whole escape sequence is just, as a kid in the 90s, was mesmerizing.
Oh my gosh,
it was like unbelievable. It's raining outside. You're trying to sneak into the castle. There's guards everywhere. You got to rescue the princess from the ball and chain guard, and how hard that is. You know what I mean? Like it's so tough. And I remember playing and like not getting through escape and just being like, I need this. I need this in my life. So yeah,
I love that. Yeah, like that's the thing is they really it does feel kind of wild to think back and be like how much of a part of our lives video games are and have been, and kind of some of those first moments when you experience that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know why, because I did really enjoy it, but I never picked up Link to the Past. And I do regret it, only because I think it would have been an amazing thing to play through when I was a little younger. Sure. By the time I actually got around to capital P playing it, I was in college, which is a very it was still super fun, but it's very different, right? By that time, like
totally. What was your favorite games on the SNES?
Chrono Trigger. I was an RPG kid. Super Mario World was amazing. There were Mega Man X I was super into that. But like I put more time into Chrono Trigger than probably almost every other game I owned combined. I played through it.
Wow.
I remember, so I rented it. That was one of the, you rent it from the video store, and I rented it so many times to beat it. And then I found a secondhand copy. I was trying to remember. I think it might have been on like really, really, really early eBay or something. It might have been like 97 or something like that, or maybe some other secondhand process. But I remember because my Chrono Trigger cartridge had somebody else's name written on it in Sharpie.
Nice.
Yeah. And awesome. That was every ending, maxed out every character. It was just so much fun. I loved it. And again, it was like, I think it was like the music. That was big. That was a big thing for me.
That wasn't your first RPG though, right? You were playing other RPGs before that?
Shining Force was probably the first. Secret of Mana was the first RPG that I played on the Super Nintendo. That was actually, because that was co-op. It was that same friend of mine who had the Genesis. It was me, him, and his cousin. His cousin came to visit this was before I actually had a Super Nintendo, and he brought his Super Nintendo because he was staying for like a month or two, and you could play multiplayer. And I was just like, this is the best. This is the best thing, right? You think like, hey, think like the League, right? Play with your friends. It's like that was the same thing. The ability to say we can actually do this at the same time, and it's an RPG. Oh my God, I'm going to spend 1 million hours doing this. So we played through that. That was like the start of kind of like the Super Nintendo RPG stuff.
Is there a Chrono Trigger MSU?
There is. There's an amazing Chrono Trigger MSU by Fantalis that I play. I try not to do it too much because it's like I will do it just nothing but that if I don't force myself to do other stuff. And then of course the Secret of Mana MSU cross product. Cross products MSUs. Unless you want to get counting with cross product, that's maybe the best MSU of all time.
Sure. That's a full MSU now, right?
I think so. I think it is. You got to have it.
That's pretty funny. So you moved on to the N64 and you played, what were some of your favorite games on the N64?
Yeah, like N64, I love that. Weirdly, like I love Donkey Kong 64, but never actually beat it. Like I kept having issues, but I played that one a bunch. Super Mario or Mario 64 was a big one. Getting 120 stars took me a million years because I wasn't very good. Still, I'm not very good. Watching Mario 64 speedrun is like, my brain explodes. The stuff
It's amazing.
120 star Mario 64 speedruns are seem like the most impossible thing to do. It's amazing how good they are. Yeah, that was a big one. I'm trying to think like that. For whatever reason, that console has kind of like faded a little bit in my memory, which is kind of sad. I think it was sort of in that weird time, like high school before like college, kind of like really re-imprints your brain. But the Super Nintendo was the thing that like really stuck with me. So it doesn't have the same kind of memory.
Sure.
So also weirdly, so my parents got my sister. I have one younger sister. They got her a PlayStation, even though she never asked for it and didn't really play video games, which I always thought was weird, but I tried to respect that. So like, I didn't really make the PlayStation mine. So I didn't really play many games on it. The one game that she played a lot was Crash Bandicoot. And so we played that a ton. There's a level where you have to like hop on the back of a tiger and race through the level. And we played that over and over and over and over. Oh my gosh. And Mario Kart 64, excuse me. That was probably, because I could play that with her. And that's like, you know, like in Inside Out, they have like the core memory of like the happy joy core memory. That's like myself and a friend and my sister and her best friend playing like the battle mode in Mario Kart 64. I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Mario Kart in general is just the game that like transcends gaming, right? It feels like everyone, even if you're not into gaming, will play Mario Kart, whether it's for the Super Nintendo, whether it's for the 64, whether it's for the GameCube, whether it's for the Switch, whatever version of Mario Kart, it feels like everyone will at least sit down and play with friends.
It's so good.
It really
did such an amazing job with it. And I couldn't agree more. It's so easy to pick up and play well enough that you don't feel like yeah, sure, if you're playing with someone who's like really, really, really good, the reality is like someone who plays a lot of video games and someone who doesn't play a ton of video games won't be that far apart. And they balanced it really well with like, you know, some of the rubber banding and the ability to get better power-ups when you're further behind. So it always felt like people had a chance to catch up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So where did you go from there? Did you stay with gaming or did life kind of get in the way?
No, I always kind of stayed with gaming. It was so the other thing that I was actually really into. So we did. I want to show. I'm actually curious. I have a hunch that there's at least a few people in the 216 Pod Discord who will admit that they did this. There is a type, and maybe you did. I'm actually curious. Did you ever play MUDs back in the day?
MUDs. It doesn't sound familiar, no.
So a MUD, it stood for multi-user dungeon. It was a text-based program where you would effectively log into a server and they were RPGs, but you could people would effectively code them in this, you know, like the old like Adventure or like Zork, like those games. It was like that, but with a whole bunch of people playing at the same time. And the creators were constantly adding new stuff. So there was one called the Two Towers MUD, which is still up to date, incredibly enough, t2tmud.org. Those guys, literally the world, like the number of rooms is accurate to the books. They put so much time and effort into it. It is staggering.
Wow.
But I have hundreds of hours, like a couple of my closest friends. One of them has like thousands of hours in this, like literally, because they'll record how long you are like active while playing. And it was that was, I think, kind of like the first sort of thing. It was that. And then I got really into Ultima Online. So you know, the pre EverQuest and WoW, that was a big time sink. So as I got into college, it was still kind of like lots of games. Ultima Online kind of faded, but I still actually would play the Two Towers. And then I got a Wii, and so I played that. I got like an older PS2, which I still have and still works. That's actually what I first started speedrunning on, and that was great for all the amazing PS2 and PS1 games that I'd missed because I wouldn't play on my sister's.
So when did you start speedrunning? Was it when you got the PS2 or was it later?
No. So it was in the pandemic. That was the so I'll mention it was. So I actually started watching speedruns I don't want to say like far back, but it was, so I think you actually mentioned it too. I used to read Kotaku all the time. And the reason was actually not because of Kotaku specifically, it was because of Deadspin, because of the sports of Gawker. And they made a mention of something about it was a run for Awesome Games Done Quick or whatever. And the first time that Games Done Quick ever hit $1 million was the AGDQ 2014 with Abda Jr. and Poexel on Couch. Where, like, for those who might remember the Wonder Shot Blunder Shot first run, but it was I watched this and I was just like, this is so cool. I didn't know there was this whole community, and I never made it to Twitch. I would only ever watch the YouTube uploads. I didn't know really what Twitch was. I had actually run into Justin TV looking for sports. Because if you go back far enough, some of the dudes who were streaming would do Justin TV, Twitch streams of like rebroadcasting sporting events that I didn't have access to. And so that's actually how I would watch it.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I never had like an account or anything. And so I never knew what Twitch was. And then eventually, I don't even remember exactly how. I think it was actually the Andy Christos match. Where Twitch had become much bigger by that point. And so it was like, okay, I should probably see what this thing everyone keeps talking about is.
Sure.
And that's how
before we get into Rando, because I don't care about Rando that much right now. But one thing that drew me to you quickly is your love for sports. I'm always drawn to people that are into gaming and in sports, because those kind of like my crossovers. And you quickly had shown that, I'm super into sports. Were you playing sports? Do you have that like competitive side to you, or is it more from a fan perspective?
No, I played sports all the time growing up. I did. So believe it or not, I was a college athlete. I did track and field. I was a thrower. And the reason I was a thrower is because in high school, I played football and I was on the line. And our line coach also happened to be our field coach. And I was talking to him one day, and he goes, "So my name is John. I don't mind. Hey, if someone wants to find a John who lives in Los Angeles, good luck." He comes to me and he goes, "John, do you want to try and do this?" And I said, "I don't know, coach." And he goes, "Well, let me tell you about the best shot putter I've ever seen." The guy was 5'9", 280 pounds, and he shows up to a meet, lights up a cigarette, sits down underneath a tree, and starts eating a sandwich. We call his name. He puts the cigarette down, doesn't stub it out, walks over to the shot put circle, throws 63 feet, walks back over to his tree, sits down, picks a cigarette back up, and eats a sandwich. And I said, I think I could do that sport.
That is awesome.
It was so good. This guy was Coach Zandy. He was the best. So I started doing that, and I was not great, but I was good enough that I was able to do track and field at a D3 level, which sounds exactly as unimpressive as it should.
I'm impressed. I am impressed. So you just mentioned you're in the LA area. So did you grow up with being a fan of some of the California teams? Because it feels like in the 80s, 90s, there's a lot of ins and outs with LA teams as far as
professional sports go. It was a dark era, but I love those teams, man. That was like the Nick Van Exel, Eldon Campbell. I'm actually wearing a Lakers shirt right now. And I will be honest, I almost wore my purple 216 pod shirt because so my girlfriend actually, when I was trying to describe to her what I was going to be doing this morning, I was like, the purple shirt podcast that I have? Oh yeah, that one. I realized I'd be like kind of wearing like a band t-shirt to the concert. So I didn't want to. But yeah, I grew up with the Lakers kind of right before the Shaq Kobe era. So I loved those teams. The Dodgers were kind of, I was just old enough to catch the tail end of like Fernando Mania and the success they had in the late 80s. But they were pretty mediocre through most of the 90s. And then a lot of the 2000s, they had the little brief blip with like Manny Wood when Manny Ramirez came over, but they were not very good until, the current ownership, the group. But yeah, dude, I played almost every sport growing up. But it's part of why I love Rando is it actually reminds me a lot of sports because of the fact that the absolute best person probably will win, but won't always win. And I think that's just, it's so enticing because it generates that feeling. It's the same rules, but it's never exactly the same, which is so cool.
So what football team are you a fan of then?
So I grew up following UCLA. That's where, I live on the west side of LA. My father works there still. But the funny thing is that they were kind of, and always have been kind of mediocre. They've been very much an afterthought in a lot of LA sports too, certainly for like football, USC. I was never really heavy into the pro football teams in LA, and I think that's a good thing, because if I had, I would have been a Raiders fan, and I don't know if I could have stomached that.
Sure.
By the way, it is amazing. The Raiders are still the most popular football team, NFL team in LA, despite the fact that there are two teams actually located in Los Angeles.
Well, I mean, they have such roots in LA. I know they're originally from Oakland, and then LA, and then back to Oakland, and now they're in Vegas. But Raiders fans are bananas. They go bananas for the Raiders, and
they're amazing.
Yeah,
like they, and I say this in both a good and bad way. They are by far the most committed fan base, and in the sense of like they will literally, I think, in some cases, die for their team. And they're just, but it's honestly, in some ways, it's inspiring, because as a fan of UCLA, you could not describe a more categorically opposite fan base in terms of how committed and inspired they are to root for their teams. It's like a very, I mean, there's been jokes made, but like the wine and cheese crew. It's like, UCLA fans are like, and I love UCLA sports. I try and travel to
sure.
all the team. We always do like a big March Madness thing every year, but I would not say our fan base is particularly rabid.
Sure. It's a pretty good basketball school, right?
Yeah.
Throughout the years.
Well, yeah, and they were really good. And this is where it's tough, right? It's like, oh, most championships. And then everyone goes, yeah, so how have you done in the last 40 years? They're good. Like, they're still good. But, you do have to recognize that it's like there are a lot of schools that have had a lot of success since UCLA was pretty inarguably, for a stretch, the best program in the country. But that is certainly not the case now, but they're very good. Like, I'm happy to follow them. I think like you're a Huskies fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've had a lot of like stretches of success. It's actually really, really interesting, if I can be honest. The like UW, UCLA, this is like terminally online conversation type stuff, but like the arguments that they will sometimes get into about who is the second best Pac-12 historical program, and it's so stupid too, right? But it's like, UW actually has a lot more recent success, and UCLA says, well, but we have more like weeks on the AP poll. It's like, who gives a crap? The more comfort. It's so dumb. At the end of the day, there's a lot of success.
That's the hard part about college sports too, is how divided everything is, with like divisions always changing and conferences changing, and
totally, we're moving.
Yeah, I mean,
leaving.
California, LA specifically, and Seattle has been a pretty big rival in a lot of sports.
Oh yeah,
throughout the years. Not really the Dodgers because of being in the National League. More of, I guess, the Padres would be the closest. I think the Mariners rival to Anaheim, of course. Anaheim,
the Angels are the Padres.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, the Lakers and the Sonics were a big rival in the 90s when the Sonics were here and around.
Sonics teams, dude, they were so fun.
In the 90s, I mean, we won a Super Bowl. The Seahawks won a Super Bowl in 13. That was pretty spectacular, feeling I'll never forget. But the 95 Mariners, the 96, 97, 98, 99 Sonics, and even the Seahawks weren't great, but they were competitive in the late 90s.
Right.
With like Kitna and Meyer and stuff.
Oh my God, John Kitna. That's a name I hadn't thought of in a while. Damn, dude.
Yeah. We actually went to my high school. Yeah.
That's sick.
And then the Huskies were actually really good in the 90s as well, in football at least. So it was prime time sports in Seattle. I mean, the 95 Mariners was electric. And some of the Sonics Lakers rivalry games were unreal. Like, I'm not an NBA fan anymore because we did get the Sonics stolen from us. But man, the Lakers and Sonics, I mean, it's mentioned in an Ice Cube song.
Yeah, right? That's right. Yeah.
That's how classic it is. Yeah.
So
the fact that you're drawn to sports and you have that competitive side makes a lot of sense when it comes to Rando as well.
Well, and I'll just add really quickly, the first basketball game I actually ever attended in person was against the Supersonics And it was, for whatever reason, I have this memory, Sam Perkins just absolutely amazing. It must have been like Eldon Campbell or something like that, but it was just like, that was so much fun. Like they were such a good team.
It was really good. And you guys have, as far as Lakers go, I mean, the Kobe Shaq years were amazing as far as just pumping out championships. It's like, if they could have just figured out a way to stay together, man, how many championships would they have had together? But
I know, right?
I mean, Kobe, arguably, number one, number two, greatest all time, was pretty spectacular to watch. And now you guys have LeBron James, and
the Lakers. It's been being a sports fan in LA has been very lucky to watch. And this is where too, though, I think sometimes people get tunnel vision because there's so many great athletes that are successful around almost every program. And especially now, you don't need to be in a big city to become the best and known. I mean, LeBron didn't build his brand in LA. LA benefited when LeBron got there. He built himself up in Cleveland and then obviously Miami. But I think I'm of the opinion that, as someone who just really loves, because a lot, again, thinking like NFL, I don't really have a team. So I try to take this mindset of I just love sports because of what it brings in terms of the competition and kind of the amazing storylines. And it is sort of in a lot of ways, the same reasons why we enjoy Rando is all these kind of twists and turns and in the moment, it's like that incredible tense and then release that you get in sports. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. So what's it like as an NFL fan? I know you're not much of an NFL fan. I know you follow it, but you don't have necessarily a team. But in LA specifically, you've got two teams and nobody gives a shit about either one of those teams in LA. I don't understand
at all. They are so first off, it's so LA is a city of transplants to begin with. And I think it's weird. This is the sense I've gotten from going, comparing let's say a New York or a Chicago to a Los Angeles, is that when people go to a New York or a Chicago, it feels like they adopt the teams of that city when they get there. When people come to LA, they're actually kind of proud to not adopt the teams that are local because the LA teams are so no one wants to be a Lakers fan if you're not a Lakers fan. No one's like, you know what? I'm really excited to just start rooting for the Lakers out of nowhere because they're the plucky underdogs. They could really use my support, right? It's everyone kind of hates the Lakers, which fine, good for them. It's one of the few times that I've actually rooted for a sports team. Usually I would say, for example, a UCLA, it's not that they're a big bad, but they're closer to the underdog, especially in football, than a USC. So being yeah, actually they're really good and people hate them because they're good as well as because they're terrible for all these other reasons. But in the NFL, it's just, on top of that, the city, all the teams leaving, everyone kind of then just saying, well, we didn't really care that much in the first place. And they brought them back, but it was so clearly, I think, a money grab, right? Especially with the Rams, coming and everyone being and then the Chargers still coming afterwards. And then they were talking the Raiders might come. If the Raiders came back, that would make a difference because again, that team base is here and loud, but you're no one really cared that the Rams left because they were getting 1,000 people at the games, right? If you you've probably seen the 30 for 30 docs and whatnot, right? They have footage from the Coliseum and it's you could have literally met every single person who was a fan individually at those games.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I guess we can get towards the rando stuff now. we hit the sports 25 minutes. So where do you first get introduced to rando then? Is it through Andy?
So yeah, it was through the Andy Christos match, and then I was like, this is awesome. I'm watching all these videos on YouTube. So a couple of people have talked about it, and I don't know if it's negative. It might have actually been for the best, but I'm gonna give a little bit of a different perspective. Back in the day, right, the form that they asked you to fill out to commentate.
Yep.
I watched dozens of matches. I got super into it and I was really excited to try and get more involved. And I was like, well, I don't really have the time or I don't think the skill to play, but I think maybe I could do this commentary thing. Let me look into what this takes. And there's a form and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I think I know these answers, but I'm not confident and I kind of don't want to submit this form and then have somebody be like, thanks, but no thanks. So I just kind of let that die and just continued watching. But I loved Rando and I watched, all I don't remember what year it was exactly. I think it was 2019 was the year that Andy won the main tournament over PKR. Is that
was that 2019? Yeah, something like that. 2018.
I'm not sure. That was the tournament that I'm thinking. I just remember that because I had gotten in with, and Andy obviously is, I think, a gateway for a lot of people.
Sure.
For reason he's, a tremendous talent, both from a skill perspective, and he's super entertaining. So that made it really easy to kind of get in. And I watched a ton, and then I kind of stopped for a while because in the pandemic, I got really into, that's when I started speedrunning, is I got really into Chrono Cross, which was the game that I started speedrunning.
What was it about that? What made you think I can even attempt speedrunning? Had you done any sort of speedrunning, or was it literally just stuff that you watched?
It was an actual, a really, really, really great run. So, and just a little bit of funny crossover. So randomly, Evil Ash 25, who is one of the early devs and actually was a very early NMG speedrunner as well. Amazing guy, and did this great RPG limit break run with Spike Vegeta. I think it was 2017. And I started like consuming a lot of old content as well. And so I found that this awesome to watch. And they go through the whole speed run. They explain everything. And I watched it a couple of times because I enjoyed it so much. So I felt like I kind of understood. And there was this a runner, Andy W3321, who does a lot of different RPGs and also was a great Chrono Cross runner. And at the time, I want to say he was like third or fourth on the leaderboard for the full game run. And he did a race with Evil Ash, and then I started watching him on Twitch one day. I'd finally found my way to Twitch, and I asked a question about something in his chat. I usually didn't like interact, which if you know me now, you'll know that sounds kind of funny because I usually can't keep my mouth shut. But I didn't really, because I was kind of nervous to say anything to people. But I asked some question, and bless Andy for doing this. He literally, because it was like kind of like, hey, why did you do blank or whatever? And he's like, oh, do you run the game? And I had the same name. He was like, PH. Do you run the game? What's your PB? He just immediately called me out, as he should have. And I was like, no, I don't. I've just watched. He was like, why don't you? I was like, you know what? I don't have a good answer to that. It's the middle of 2020. We're all staying at home. I have way more free time than I know what to do with, especially on the weekends. Okay. And I tried, I had a copy of Chrono Cross. I had my old PS2. I fired it up and I went to work. There's some really extraordinary materials that Ash and Andy, Fat Man, Runner Watcher, and then Connor Cordell, and then the OG Railcoon. That I'm obviously citing a bunch of names here because that was like the crew that had all these early materials that really kind of like allowed me to get started, and anybody could pick it up. It was amazing. And
it's a pretty long speed run, right?
It is. So my first run ever, I did it in 3 segments, and it took me just shy of 10 hours. Yeah.
So speedrun is a loose term.
Speedrun is a very, like, that's the thing, is there really aren't any like glitches or sequence breaks in Chrono Cross. It was fairly late. I love Chrono Cross, and it has maybe one of the best soundtracks of any game ever made. That was a big part of why I was like, okay, I can do this a lot, right? Because again, the whole music. And just doing that, I got like kind of a rush because it was like, oh, this took forever, but also this was really cool. This was really different because like I felt like I was starting to understand what was going on in a way that I never had. Because there's a bunch of mechanics that the game doesn't really explain at all, which is kind of the problem with that game in general. But the speed run actually takes advantage of a lot of them really extensively, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, this is how this is supposed to work. This is super easy. This is awesome. And so yeah, also just quick shout out, Sky Splinter, fantastic MSU. There we go. Got to get that out there. Okay. Right. But yeah, so I started running it, and I was like, you know what? My goal here is to just try and get kind of into like the mid 7-hour range, because that was the time. Under 7 hours was kind of like the good time, and I was like, maybe if I get to like 7:30, and then I'll stop. And then I got to 7:30, and I was like. And I think this happens maybe with a lot of people who do speed running. I went, I could do better. And so I kept going. And I was like, oh, I'm at 7:15. Could I get to like almost under 7. And then I had like a couple of really good runs, and I was like 704, 702. And I was like, well, I can't stop now. And then I got under 7, but I got under 7 with a really, really, really big mistake. And I was like, well, I need to like keep going. And so I kept going, and there was like a group of additional kind of like runners who were a little newer to the game. This guy, Super Handy, who basically made all the materials that I used. And then this is really relevant for Randa. The current world record holder is Carbon Drank, is amazing. And then Azrael Hobbs, who is not currently active, but was like another one of the guys who was kind of dropping we were all kind of like dropping our times together, right? Like learning the game together. It was awesome. Mm-hmm. We would like be in each other's streams constantly. And so I kept grinding Chrono Cross. And all of a sudden I look up and I'm like, I'm 5th on the leaderboard. And then I had the best run I will ever have in my life. I don't really have a whole lot of desire to go back to the game, because I'll just be straight up. I'm not as good at the game as some of the guys I have a faster time than, but Chrono Cross is super RNG heavy. And I just got like one with really good luck, like really good stats, really fortunate encounter luck. I had so the world record was 6:36. And there are 2 runners that have ever gotten a time under 6 hours, 40 minutes, Connor Cordell and Carbon Drank. And my time was 6 hours, 40 minutes, and 1 second, because I forgot to mash a cutscene. There's a cutscene that's skippable. Almost no cutscenes in the game are skippable. And there's a cutscene at the very end of the game that is skippable. And I forgot to mash because I was thinking about what I needed to do in the last part of the game. And it cost me like 2 seconds. And I was like, no, I don't care.
Incredible.
I'm probably never getting below this again. But in that moment, so there were a couple people. So there was a Brazilian runner, Zan9BR, and then Azrael Hobbs. So Zan did Link to the Past. There is actually a reason for this. I'm sorry, this is very circuitous. But Zan did Rando as well. He played Link to the Past Rando. And Hobbs decided he wanted to do a Rando. And he like kind of prodded me, because I went in his chat and I was like, oh my God, Link to the Past Rando. I know all about this. This game is so cool. I'm so pumped you're doing it. And he was like, yeah, PH, why don't you do one? And I was like, yeah, same thing. I didn't have a good reason not to. So I was like, okay. I did one. And then I did another.
It was over. So
I was like, I did one, and then I watched Andy do a run with the Breath of the Wild MSU, and I was like, well, that's amazing. I need to do another one of these with an MSU. And that was the first MSU I ever used as well, was the Breath of the Wild MSU.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this, because you were watching Rando for a while. What was it that prevented you from picking it up?
I hadn't played that much Link to the Past. And so thankfully I had finally beaten it, right? When I think I was in my early 20s or something, but I did it on an emulator on a computer with a keyboard. So it was not a great experience. I think I probably created somewhere between 8 and 500,000 save states to get through the game. And I really liked Link to the Past. Like, I enjoyed watching the Rando, but I didn't feel like I understood the game or was good enough. But the second time I came around to it, it was after I had been playing Chrono Cross all this time, and I'd been speedrunning Chrono Cross, and I just felt, I guess, maybe a little more confident and comfortable in tackling a game like Chrono Cross the same way. Like, when I first started, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, because I played it, twice when I was younger, and I wasn't quote unquote good. I didn't even know how you would be good or not good at an RPG like that. And so I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I actually think it went pretty well, because I'd watched so much. I knew like all of the routes, like not that it was like a great time, but I think the first seed I ever played, I finished in like a little over 3 hours, which like for like having never done it, I think was reasonably quick, mainly just because I'd watched so much. I was like, oh yeah, you go through here and then you go all the way through Kakariko and you check all of these things. And so I kind of knew where to look for stuff. I wasn't really getting lost that much along the way. And then I just was bad. So that was, I think, part of it too, is that having watched it so much, when I did finally get around to playing it, I was like, oh, this is really fun. And I'm not starting from total scratch.
That makes sense. How turned off were you after having the idea of having to fill out a form to commentate? Did that sort of put you off completely from doing that in the future? Or
no, it's really funny because I saw that and I was like, I'm not comfortable submitting this, which frankly also, especially after hearing like the amazing interview you did with Clear Mouse, was so silly of me, because it sounds like when she submitted it, like they reached back out to her and they taught like the people who do this stuff are just people, right? We're like, now that I'm in the community a little bit more, and I realized I was so scared of it for no good reason, because people are really kind about this stuff a lot of the time. But in the moment, I was just very nervous, and so I kind of removed myself. So I definitely didn't feel like, I don't think that was a reason not to play it. It might have been a reason not to start racing it, but another one of your early interviewees, and this probably won't come as a surprise, was Homemade Beer, found his way into my channel on like the second or third one of the seeds that I did. And Beer is like, Beer is the only person from the community I've also met in person. He happens to also be in Southern California, and is incredible. He was so welcoming. He was like, "Hey, dude, if you're going to be doing this, you should," like, he encouraged me to try the ladder for the first time. He was like, "Hey, let me get you into a couple of servers. Here's this link. Here's the like Go Mode podcast. Here's the link to the Average Frustrated Gamer server, where a lot of the people that he knew really well kind of congregated." And he was like, "Hey, are you going to do another one?" Like, kind of encouraging. He was really great about that. So if you ever want to think about like the dealer, the drug dealer, just a taste. That's Homemade Beer.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Beer is such a good, personable dude that's like easy to get along with, and just there to have like a good time.
Yeah. It was awesome.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it feels like you found people almost immediately upon entering the community as a runner.
And as I alluded to earlier, I do have a probably bad habit of, once I start talking, I don't have a great shutoff valve. So I was very willing to kind of like, and I love watching this stuff, right? I think it's so interesting to follow the people and root for them. And I actually liken it a lot to like golf, as weird as that might sound in some ways. I know some people have said poker, and that's also one that I think is really good. But if you watch golfers, or when you play golf, you focus on yourself a lot. You are still competing with other people if you choose to compete in golf. But what they do really has almost no bearing on you in the moment. It's mostly just, hey, that was a great shot. Like, you'll see like golfers will applaud, they'll high five for a hole in one for another guy. Like, it's that same mentality that was very kind of drew me to Rando and put me into a lot of other people's chats, and then just sort of being, I think it was actually Super Malmo World, who at one point she was somewhere and I popped in and I said hi, and it was like the third or fourth chat in like a few days that this had happened, and she was like, and the person responded, "Hey, what's up, PH?" And she goes, "Wait, you know PH too? Who the hell? Where is this guy coming from? Who knows this guy? Why does everyone know who this person is?"
It really felt like that. It just felt like, hey, here's PH. And you're like, "Oh, I know PH." And it's like, wait, how do you know PH? It's just like he's brand new. It's like, yeah, but we all know him. I don't know. It just sort of happened. I think a lot of it has to do with your personality. Like, you're very, and I hate using the word nice, because it feels like it's like you try to can't come up with a better word. You're extremely nice. You're very personable. You're very friendly. And it just makes it easy to be around you. Like, I want to be around people that kind of give life, and you're totally that. And it makes sense for me to hear that people are like, "Oh yeah, I know PH," and you just kind of fit right in.
No, and that's so, I am so thankful to hear that. And that I guess the mentality I come with, as funny as it sounds, is the golden retriever mentality, right? I'm here. I'm going to try and put a smile on people's faces. I'm going to try and be in a good mood. And I don't really know necessarily what's going on, but I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Sure.
Let's just come in and, like, wag the tail a little bit. Because I think it can help.
Yeah, sometimes. For sure. It's funny because knowing that you're from LA and you're in a Hollywood elite, that that you'd be a little bit more put off, but you're not at all. It's great.
Oh my God. That is the first and hopefully last time anyone's ever referred to me as the Hollywood elite.
Oh man. All right. So you're playing the game. You're finding a community quickly with homemade beer, and he's introducing you to different servers and stuff. Where do you find that you start to step your game up, and do you start entering tournaments?
Yeah, so I fairly quickly I actually got into the ladder, and this is one of those kind of like pivot points where you really wonder. I won my first ladder race, and it was against someone. I think it was against Taco, who was much more experienced than I was. And I only call it out to say the reason I won was basically just Taco got really unlucky and got like a glitch early. I think they like picked a chicken up in Chicken Hut or something, and it cost them like a bunch of time. Or something like that. Like I should not have won. Like, let's be very clear. They were much better than I was. And I kind of like, big dumbed my way into a win. But it was that thing of like, oh, damn, maybe I can do it, right? It was like that moment where if I had lost, and who knows, if I'd lost by like 20 or 30 minutes, I'd hope that I wasn't, that I wouldn't have let that demoralize me, but it might have. But the fact that I did win really pushed me to try. So what I did, and actually I'm going to just pump up an upcoming guest here, I think a little bit, is I did what James FNX's new tool now makes much easier, is I started going through and finding tons of races on race time that people had done, and then asyncing them. That was like all I did. So I didn't really, and I still actually don't have very many ladder races. I actually like, I'm kind of sad that I missed the era of the big race because I love those. And so what I would do is I would find races that had more than 20 or 30 people, mostly in open modes, especially in the early days, and I just played a ton of them. And then at some point, I don't remember if I found my way to them or what happened. I got looped in. I think it was actually just like asking, "Hey, how do I get better?" And someone pointed me to NMG, and I made my way over to the NMG community. Fox Lisk kind of was one of the first people who sort of pushed me. He also does race rando in a variety of ways. And there's just so many amazing runners in that community. And obviously some of them overlap in a few different ways, but not a ton, right? But that was kind of, I think, the thing. And I'll be totally honest, it was both good and bad. There are absolutely ways it was bad, because I started learning NMG and my time started coming down, but it was a very toxic, it's probably the worst relationship I ever had with this game was I allowed it to seep into my brain that because I was getting better at NMG that I should win. And that's the worst mindset. And I think you actually called me out on it. Thankfully, it was while we were having the 216 weeklies, and you came into my chat after I wasn't on a restream, and you were like, "Hey man, how'd you do?" And I was really down. I was like, "I don't understand how I lost by this much, and I feel like I should be better." And you were like, "Well, okay, you want to be on a restream? We'll like put you to it." And it was like a good call out because, and over time I've realized, and I think it's been a much healthier for me way to think about it is, first off, nobody, quote unquote, capital D, deserves to win. I think that certain players are more likely to win than others, but no one deserves to win or be close to a time. It's rando. But then secondarily, it's like, I wasn't nearly as good as I wanted to think I was. And I had to have that reckoning with myself. Thankfully, I had that reckoning before I really got into like the league. I had that reckoning with myself when I was still kind of like, it was also, I had like snuck into the first main tournament I entered. And I think in some ways, again, similarly, that was kind of like probably bad. It would have been better if I had missed it because it would have allowed me to like say, hey, that's the thing I want to aspire to. I need to keep working. But I was like, no, hey, I made this the first time. Maybe I'm that.
Right.
So thankfully, I got a reality check pretty quickly. But
I think that's important, right? Like, I feel like so many times, I mean, I go back and look at my old races in SRL days, and I look at the comments, and I'm like dogging on myself, and I'm like, I'm brand new. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, thinking that you should be better than you were because, offline I'm putting up better results or whatever. It's like, gotta like check yourself and realize like it takes time. There's people that put way more time. And then there is people that are like prodigies that can come in and just pick it up right away. I'm not one of those people, and I needed to check myself. I hope when you say that I checked you, I didn't do it. I wasn't a dick about it.
No. It wasn't even in a bad way. You were like, because you were actually very generous about it. You were like, oh, I totally get that feeling. Why don't we put you on, like, hey, if we do this, and I actually wasn't able to join, and it was really unfortunate in that sense. But you were like, I'll make sure you're on Restream next week so we can see and we can watch and maybe figure out. Like you positioned it in a great way of like, hey, I want to help you understand here. And I missed that. Thankfully, but it was the thought process of like, wait, why am I not taking that same mentality? So even now, like I've said this on a number of places, because I think I wouldn't consider myself one of like the best players, but I'd say like I'm relatively consistent at like doing okay in tournaments. Like I'm usually a reasonably good chance to make brackets for, more standard modes and whatnot. And I went back and you just talked to him about it. I watched my first race against GGW in the main tournament this year. Mm-hmm. And he was very nice about it, by the way, which, as we all know, that's his default. No, he was very he was very tactful about it, which I appreciated, because he could have been much more blunt and would have been very correct. He just completely outplayed me, even outside of the routing stuff, which he was totally right about. Like I looked at our pods. We entered with the same equipment. We entered more or less at the same time. And he left 45 seconds out before I did. It was so much faster. And it was execution through rooms. It was the dark rooms. It was being smarter about how to set up a death warp, which was something I wasn't even thinking about, which is the problem. And he was just like, he knew it was coming. He was bouncing off enemies in ways that deboosted him towards where he wanted to go. It was so clearly evidence of how much better he was and is than I am at the game. When you hear people talk about like, oh, it's just luck. And it's like, yeah, man, luck is certainly part of it. But that's like, he pays for that luck by like, because if I, big dumbed my way into a better route, he probably still beats me because he's paying that off with all of the 10 and 20-second time saves he does everywhere else because he's so good at the game. And there's a group of runners that I really like. I respect everyone, but there's like a group where I watch and I'm like, if I have the time and can, and there's no guarantee that you can, that's what I want to get to. That's like my aspirational group because they're so good, and you can see as you learn more where they pick up those small segments. Because I hear that same thing by a lot of people, like, how did I lose by 10 minutes? And then you realize, oh, damn, it's because some people are just really incredible at this stuff. And
it's
like
true.
Small things.
Self-assessment is something that the community, and probably not just limited to Rando, probably any sort of like competitive gaming aspect of anything. I played Magic. Yeah. If people are not aware of how good people are good, they expect, I can play Magic the Gathering at Friday Night Magic and I can beat almost everyone there. And so I must be good. And then you play against actual better people. And it's like, no, like, it's how did they're lucky. They beat me because they drew the right card. It's like, no, it's probably because they're better.
Yeah. Like, come on, man. That happens one time. Sure. If it's the same people who are having this amount of success, they don't live life with a 4 over. They're good.
Yeah, and so it's harder for a lot of these runners, especially. I mean, if you listen to the GGW episode, where it's like you're constantly getting shit on by the community who thinks that you're just really lucky. It's like, yeah, I mean, luck does play a part, but it's not the entire story for sure.
No, it does. And also, just because I said it, I want to add, maybe my favorite result is every time Gamma does really, really, really well in spoiler races, because there's this like meme in the community that Gamma just has the seed reader. And it's like, well, yeah, but when everyone else also gets the seed reader, funnily enough, he still wins every time. It's so weird.
Yeah, it is so funny.
Like the idea that like, there are people, and like you said, there are people who are prodigies who have come to the game. And that's also hard too. It's like, oh man, this person started playing after me, and now I think they might be better than I am. But it's at the same time, this is where I've worked to like try and find. The term is like find joy. It's like I am so pumped because again, it's like the thing that I can draw from is how many unbelievable people do choose to be a part of this community and choose to do this same weird niche hobby that we've somehow come to and put so much of our time and effort in. And the fact that there's other people who also want to do that with me.
Yeah.
Holy cow. That's amazing. And if some of them just happen to pick it up faster, that's I'm just so happy for them, because at its core, we're all kind of in the same weird little boat.
Sure.
And we hopefully we can find joy and appreciation, again, presuming that the person in question isn't a complete jerk, like of course can.
Sure. Sure. And again, this is what makes you a good person, is it feels like you are genuine in when you say that about being happy for other people. I know that sounds simple, and that idea sounds very simple, but it feels like so often we're not happy for other people in this game, especially when we're racing against them. I know I can be guilty of it as well, but it feels like with you, PH, you're very genuine in that. Like, you are rooting for everyone else to do really, really well.
Yeah, I think, and this is a little bit like peeling back behind the curtain. A number of people have talked about some of their, personal challenges. So I don't know if this will surprise you or not, but the reason I am the way I am is because there is a part of me that is insanely problematically hyper competitive. Like, actually to the degree that when I was a kid, my parents literally had to enroll me in a how to play nice with others camp.
Oh, wow. Never would have guessed that. Ever would have guessed that.
It's an actual thing. They literally will have you play games and teach you. It was a problem. It was my grandfather was a Marine and the nicest man alive, and taught me how to play golf, and would literally like out of a cartoon grab my ear and walk me off the course sometimes when I was learning when I was a kid, because I would be so bad.
Wow.
And it was, I think in some ways, though, it's good because I had to come to that realization with myself. Hopefully, I can't enjoy the things I enjoy with other people if the only way that I can enjoy them is if I am absolutely the best. Because, spoiler, I'm not. Almost not. There's only one person who's the best, and even that person isn't going to be the best all the time. So,
yeah,
just so
sure.
It's hard, and it was hard. It was really hard, but thankfully, I had enough time. I've had friends who've also been very willing to, basically look me straight in the eye and be like, "Dude, you are being a dick. Stop." So while I was in college, I did a cappella. Because I'm the world's coolest person, and acapella is
sure.
I loved acapella. By the way, I loved it. It's the most fun thing I've ever done. But the group, in many ways, I'm more glad I did that than anything else I did in school. Not even because of the actual singing and everything else, but because every single one of the guys that I was in the group with, at some point or another, you have to have these conversations about what you're doing right, wrong. And every one of them, people who were older than me, younger than me, better singers than me, worse singers than me, would be like, dude, what the fuck? What is wrong? And taking those moments and having to because I do try to be a nice person in the abstract, and then being like, hey, I think I'm generally a nice person. And then in these moments, I'm such a bad person that it makes them not want to work with you on something that they kind of have to. All right, and I'll just say in the abstract, maybe also relevant for other community things right now. But hopefully you take a view of that and you realize, I got to do something about this. So I do tamp down that, every once in a while it tries to worm its way back up. But thankfully, that's why the fact that the people who play Rando are great makes it easier, because it helps to be like, you know what? No. This person is awesome. I should be happy for them. And that makes a big difference. Yeah.
It feels like co-op has also been very important to you, because you mentioned, co-op as a kid, going back and forth, multiplayer, just things that allow you to play with friends. So tell me a little bit about your experience with your one season in the league this last year.
And our team only exists because of you. You recommended that I chat with James FNX, who was looking for a team. James is amazing. I had already met Tepedino, who was actually friends with that Brazilian runner I mentioned earlier, Zan, and was actually in my chat when I got that Chrono Cross final run. He thought I was kidding when I was like, I'm going to miss this by 1 second. And then he was like, oh my God, you weren't kidding. But so Tepa actually did my first ever NMGPB review. He's amazing, such a good guy, and James similarly. And you kind of actually, or the glue that brought us together. And I had a blast. The league is the best thing. So the two best things. I'm holding up two fingers like you can see me right now. The two best things that we as a community do in Rando, in my opinion, are the mentor tournaments and the league. And the former is because it really shows the welcoming nature and that we are really excited for people to get better at the game. And the latter because it's playing with your friends. What could be better than that? Literally. Co-op is terrifying, by the way. I feel so bad. I love co-op, but it is scary. It's by far the scariest thing that I have to do. Because I'm like, I don't want to mess up and like if I lose, my teammate loses. Oh my god! Like, what am I going to do?
Sure.
But it's like any team sport, right? You gotta, totally. Like Darity was talking about a couple of weeks ago. You got next play.
Yep, totally. Next play mentality for sure. So you go 6-2. James at 5-5 and Tepidino 7-1. You guys make the playoffs, and it looks like you didn't actually qualify for the Invitational.
You did not,
but got real close, right? Like
we had it. I mean, I think
I think I gave you the kiss of death by picking you guys to win the by winning.
Yeah, it's. I've heard that the Fear Agent selection is not a great.
It's terrible. No, you do not want me to pick you.
Look, Asai was a great team. The runners there were like. I think once you get to the playoffs, there's probably, and I think other people have talked about this too, in the Open League, there's probably a bit of a wider variance between the strongest team and the weakest team than you would maybe see in Invitational. But once you get to the playoffs, pretty much any of the teams in the playoffs, I think, are very good, right? And any runner that you go up, again, it's like, even against some of the weaker teams, again, I would never assume a win, but against every single member of every single playoff team, I would say it is very like if it's it's better than a coin flip potentially in some cases, but it's not by a lot. It's every race could easily go either way, and I would never be like, I could not believe that we beat or we lost to so and so because they're just all good. And it was a little bit of a shame in that we started 2-0 and it was like, oh, okay, so I think we can get through here. We only need to win one of the next three races. And then aside, just they banged it out. They reverse swept us. The Celtics could have taken enough, and and deserved to move on. And I was just glad to get a chance to do it. I wasn't super worried about making or not making Invitational. I think it would have been nice to make it, but in the moment, it was a lot more. I'm really enjoying this. I'd like to win. I'd like to make playoffs. And then from there, it's kind of a crapshoot, right? Like, again, I think both in Gembro with you and Maniacal with the Spoiler Log have talked about, they literally were a playoff team in Invitational this season. And in the past season, they were a runner for getting to not go to GT on 6 crystals away from not making it at all, right? So that's like, you talk about razor thin margins, and there's no question in my mind that those guys are incredibly good and deserved to make it. And if they hadn't gotten in, I would have also said, yeah, Rando's Rando, and that stuff is really tough.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you a couple questions quickly about the league. First, the name, Past the Picanha. Where does that come from?
Tapadino's Brazilian. We were trying to come up with it. We didn't have like a good name, and then we were talking. We all love food. It's the great thing that brings us all together. Everybody's got it.
Yep.
Yeah. And we were chatting about it. I don't know exactly. We were trying to think, and then I think James may have mentioned something. I want to say it was James who mentioned something about like Brazilian barbecue, and then Tepin may have called out picanha or something. But and then I went and found like a picture that happened to have 3. It was like, it worked out great because it was a picture of picanha that had 3 pieces on it. I was like, oh, it's like us. There we go. Yeah. And then thankfully Drossi chimed in with picanha is the best thing ever. And then like it just became a bit of a thing because people love picanha. So
sure. That's awesome. And then I guess just the overall experience of your performances, right? Like I said, you went 6-2. Looks like a couple of your losses were co-op, but how did you feel you performed, and how did you?
I thought I played
Did you enjoy
well. I was actually very happy. I lost one in co-op and then one individual. So in the most technical sense, I have the same one player 1v1 record as Ninjembro. Slight difference in volume.
Sure.
But the thing was that so our first match we didn't check left side swamp, and the answer was there. Is what are you going to do? And then this is the thing, going back and looking at it. Our opponents were Solsky and Josh Bittner. They were able to do it because I think they had a better route early, and so they were able to play it off. Right? There's ranking, but also I think they played better than we did in that game. I thought I played pretty well. Like I felt good. In most of my matches, I felt like I had a pretty. If I remember correctly, I wasn't like super narrow margins. I actually had a big enough time gap that in one race I did that same thing and went to GT on 6 crystals and still was able to win. It was both a bad feeling and a good feeling. I was like, I feel pretty good that didn't cost me the loss, but let's not do that again. And then I'm not very good at swordless. I was racing Tony T. Young twice. We did an Invrosia first, and he just wasn't super familiar with inverted. Also, that Invrosia, I think you have like, there are certain people. I'm also going to mention, like, for example, Tam is one of my favorite chat shit posters. There's a long list. You could go through like a bunch, but I think Tam might be the funniest person in the community in like a good sense. But like you're similar in that, like periodically I'll just see like Fury, and it's like making a joke about finding the Moon Pearl because I kind of last located it. And you were like, imagine this is it, because you'd made like a comment, like 20 minutes ago, like, I wonder if they should go here. And then unfortunately, the problem is I don't think he realized that you could jump down and mirror to get to the back of TR. I don't remember exactly, but I think that might have been the issue. So it was just kind of like a dead run, which feels bad. Like after the fact, I'm like, that sucks. Like I don't like winning like that, but, that it was league, so it's not like you can double FF or something. And then on the second race it was swordless. He outplayed me. I should have checked Helma. I didn't. I was green pendant, and the answer was green pendant. And so I did a bunch of other stuff, and I think he might have been ahead anyway. But it was
sure.
Like he's really good. Like actually, one of my earlier losses on ladder was to Tony as well.
You guys actually got a bye in the first round, right?
Yes, we were I believe we were the second overall seed in the Open.
Wow,
yeah, we
that's impressive.
We did great. I was really happy with how we played. And James is excellent. I'm going to give Tepa a little bit just because I think sometimes people don't know him as much. He is maybe one of the most underrated runners because he doesn't always participate in everything, but he is super good and super fast. And, anytime he like jumps into stuff, everyone's like, oh my gosh. Like, I think I remember Armalex mentioning like Tepa is super scary, in like a conversation about, on the league. And it's like, cause he was around, he did a bunch, he was involved in, I think one of the, Stranger, league circumstances in season 3, I want to say. And I think that was the Scarlet issue? I think he was from.
Oh, was that season 4?
I don't remember. He was on Frump's time back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
But they that was a good team, and he is a very talented runner, along with a lot of other people. But I think he's not thought of as often as good as he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think he's just not out there as much, right? Like I feel like I only see him during the league,
right?
But yeah, a Brazilian runner that I think has done really well in Brazilian tournaments as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Is Past the Bacania coming back for season 6?
So we're going to have to figure out what's going on with our plans. It sounds like I basically don't want to speak for either James or Tepedino. I think the latter might not might not be available during what it sounds like league might be. So James and I will chat. We'll figure it out. I'd like to, hopefully, like I had a blast with the team, and I'm also, again, still really thankful to you for recommending that James and I connect, because James is awesome. I mean, I think anyone who's used his tool can recognize how much he's willing to give of himself, and he's also really, really, really good and understands the game super well. Like I appreciate working with him because he still helps me on a lot of like routing stuff and everything.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to him too coming up in a few weeks. Yeah. Gosh, we've gone for 90 minutes
so
almost,
sorry.
dude. I'm sorry. I literally didn't look at the clock and I just looked at it. I'm like, holy crap, we've talked forever. And I honestly, PH, we could keep going. And in fact, if you're cool with it, I'm going to keep going just for a little bit longer.
I would love to. Like this is okay. There is almost nothing I would rather do. Like, I know you don't really race anymore, but there's like nothing that I would rather do than like hang out in your chat and shit post while you do. Like, my favorite stream of yours, if I can actually really quickly, was when you were doing that picture of Ganon that with Link, like the fire.
Oh yeah,
that was like the first stream of yours I ever saw, and it blew, like, again, to the point of how many talented people you just were knocking stuff out. I was like, not only could I not do this, but even if I tried to do it, it would take me a million hours. And you're just like, like, it was so cool. And that was like one of the most fun streams I've ever been in.
Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, one thing I do miss about streaming is a lot of music stuff is, play a lot of different music stuff, and a lot of people that are into music or music similar that I'm into, which is, I have a pretty wide swath of taste. Like, I like lots of different music, and so that was always fun to do those streams
up just in the background while I've worked before. Like, I've used your stream in my work playlist more than once.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. And like we just did the 216 summer playlist.
Yeah, man,
that went better than I could have hoped. It's so good. Like, just good. Hearing everyone's different tracks, and there's a bunch of stuff that I'd never heard before that are just complete bangers, and I'm a huge music fan, so that's the one thing I miss about you being in my streams in particular, is we'd have a lot of good times listening to different music.
But it's just, that's why it's like so it's suffice to say, I'm here as long as you're willing to have me.
Okay. Where does the name PH come from?
Placeholder. It's the worst name ever.
Was this something that you used for different games or different online personalities, or was the first time?
It was because, this is like, again, I'm incredibly stupid. I didn't want to have to get a verified YouTube account. And the only way that you could upload videos longer than 10 minutes to YouTube is with a verified YouTube account, or maybe it's 30 minutes. It's certainly, maybe it's even 2 hours. I don't remember. But if you're trying to upload a 7-hour Chrono Cross run, which is, I was trying to like start uploading my runs when I first started speedrunning. Well, okay. So I said, you know what? All right, I'm just going to make a Twitch account because it automatically records, and I need a name. I don't have a name. PH, placeholder, like whatever, I don't care. PH1, PH12, PH123. And then like I used the Fibonacci sequence because like PH123 and 1234 and whatever were taken. And I was like, well, this one's a little bit less common. It's probably there. And then almost immediately, a whole bunch of people were like, oh my gosh, PH like Fibonacci. That's so clever. And I went, yeah, sure. That's exactly what it has nothing to do at all with the fact that
that's hilarious.
Like, I was not that smart. I wish I had been. And a bunch of people now call me Fibonacci, which is great. Like, I love that they are smarter about it than I was with the naming.
That's so funny. That's so good. Okay, so this is kind of a question based on where we're at currently. So the Rando Council just imploded. Yeah. Normally, I like to talk about where do you see yourself in the community and that kind of thing. Rando is changing. It's not going to be as drastic as everyone thinks. We thought we lost Sinak. He put the bot back up.
Right.
It's good for him to actually, I think, get away and kind of distance himself. For his mental health, I think that's really good for him. And it's cool that he's still letting us use the bot. And, what happens in the future without the council? I think the council is kind of useless anyway, so it's whatever. But where do you see yourself in the community? Do you see yourself ever trying to like do any sort of volunteer work as far as adminning or whatever the future of the council or this, what's it called? TARC, whatever's coming from that. Do you see yourself volunteering for any of that stuff? Did you apply for the council next term?
So really quickly, I'm fortunate in that it just happened. I do want to really quick just double down on what you said about Sinak. And I think a lot of great words have been said about him, but since we're fortunate to talk about it now, Sinak was in so many ways the glue that held a lot of this community together, and deserves only as much time and respect and appreciation as people can give him, because he did everything and is just the best. I could not agree with you more that, hopefully will be good for him to get a chance to maybe step away, because we relied so heavily on him, and in so many ways that it was, I think, unfair. So I'm hopeful that he'll get a chance to take a little bit of a breather and enjoy not having to be responsible for, 300 kids playing on the boat, so to speak.
Right.
But,
yeah.
So I did apply to the council, but I didn't, apparently. So I thought I had. I literally, the day that so I applied to the last council, didn't get in, which, by the way, again, even if whether I would get in or wouldn't get in, the people that they have picked, I have consistently found that they do a really good job, in my opinion, of selecting people that I think that I have a ton of respect for, and that are, for the most part, clearly focused on just the good of the game. I say for the most part only because there's been a lot recently about, not always great actors. Yeah. But I think that I was excited to try and offer my time. I see it as a service position. I think it's kind of a thankless role. And I think that they did and do a great job in that role in as much as they could. And I wanted to try and give back. Right. So I did, I was an admin for the NMG League this past season when we did the reset, which I probably did the least work out of the admins, certainly less so than Relkin and Yarok, and of course Foxlisk, who kind of runs the whole thing. But I did want to apply. So I actually, the day they announced it, I opened it, I filled out the form. I could swear that I hit submit. I have a memory in my head of hitting submit. I found out recently they don't have my application, which I'll just say, after recent events, I was like, maybe that was a bit of a blessing. But I'll put it this way: if they were to reopen applications for the Tark it up, whatever, and just do a process anew, I would certainly submit. I still do think that it is, again, I'd like to think that I have a reasonably measured approach to a lot of this stuff. I've been fortunate to have connected with a lot of different parts of the community. Again, kind of that, I'll just reuse the golden retriever energy, hopefully, and try to bring that. But on the flip side, if they're just like, we're going to take the applications as it stands. I know some of the other people that applied. I have enormous respect and faith in the people, at least that I know, who also applied. So I'm not worried about it either way. I'm excited to see where we go with Tark. And I really agree with you that in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to change as much as some people think it might. I think it's probably just incremental improvements, which are good.
What would you like to see changed if you were to be whatever council or rulers or whatever they are that's going to be over at Tark making the racing rules? Is there anything that you would want to change, or would you want to keep it stable?
Yeah, I think I'd ban dark rooms. Just
smart.
No, I see. That's the thing. I really enjoy Rando. I really enjoy it. I think it was in all the conversations around Specky Clip. I think it was Skelly who encapsulated it the best when he said, "You know what? At the end of the day, I wanted it in, but I really love the game, and today it's no different than it was a few months ago, and I'm going to keep playing it." And I was like, and there have been a number of other people who've shared similar sentiments. That was the one that kind of, I think, stuck out to me a little. That's another guy who's unbelievable at the game. I think that doesn't always get thought of in the same way as he should. But it's just so funny because, I love Rando. I am excited. Rando is how I decompress after work. It's how I enjoy myself on the weekends a lot of the time. It's fun. I love being around the people in the community. I love playing the game. And so I guess it's less that I'm super excited about any big changes as much as hoping that the people who have given their time and have sounds like really stressed out about a lot of things, just have a chance to, like, I think the goal here would be to come to a solution that doesn't require that like 10 or 15 or 20 individuals have to lose sleep and feel like they've failed. Like that's actually the only really sad thing to me in all of this is I've seen multiple people who have given the impression that they feel that they have failed, either the broader community or some sub communities or groups that they have been a part of. And that's just tough to me because they've done so much work and for no pay. There's no, like, it's not like someone's like, oh yeah, big rando. Like, this is a volunteer free game. And yeah, you might disagree with them. Like some of the, like, I'll just, again, I probably would have, if I was on the council list last term, I probably would have voted yes on Specky Clip. But I don't need Specky Clip to enjoy rando. And the people who voted no, honestly voted no, because like I've talked to some of them. I've seen their rationales. I've talked to some of them outside. And that's the thing that sometimes feels like it gets forgotten. Every single one of those people is a person. And when you talk to them, it's like, yeah, they had a reason. And it was a good reason. Or even if it wasn't a good reason, it was their reason.
Yep.
And they're giving themselves freely to do this. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to soapbox there, but they deserve, I think, a lot of appreciation for what they've done, even if I don't always agree with what they do.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's the heart of it, right? Like, we're never going to agree on everything. Like, trying to get 300 people to agree on which glitch should be allowed is impossible. It's impossible because everyone's going to have a different opinion. And so it's like it is a tough job. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
The only thing we can agree on is that Russell Wilson is clearly the best quarterback the Broncos have ever had.
True. 100%. 100%. All right. The tilt question, which I'm really curious to hear, especially hearing about your past. First of all, if you get tilted, what MSU do you go to next? Oh,
that is a really good question.
So there's that. And then when tilt happens, whether it's in the middle of the race or after a race, how do you handle it?
So definitely, it's usually like a more chill one. I've actually for a while I was using your Studio Ghibli. MSU was a big favorite on that front.
Yeah,
that's like very Hollow Knight from Humbug is awesome.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah,
Humbug is another, like, everything is a banger. Even when they're not, like bangers in the same like C64, they're all, he does such a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Breath of the Wild is a big one. Weirdly, I think the Donkey Kong 1 to 3 the cross product does is probably, it's not like relaxing. I get, like, some of the songs are pretty chill, but it's more that, like, it just makes me smile because he did such a good job. I don't want to spoil it, but for anybody who hasn't used it, play it, beat the game, and then don't fast forward through the credits because it's so cool what he did there. And it's like the sort of thing that I would never have thought of on my own, but it just puts a smile on my face. Not all.
Yeah, that's an old one because when I started making MSUs, it wasn't like there is now. There's thousands of MSUs.
Yeah, literally.
When I first started, there was like 10, 15. When I first made Breath of the Wild and the Super Mario Odyssey, I think those were my first two. There was not a lot of MSUs, and now there's just so many. Yeah. It's so hard to choose. Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh, and actually, one other, just the McKellen Chill 3 that you did. I've had multiple people in my chat be like, "Hey, that's the mood. Can we put that on?"
Yeah.
Oh, it's perfect.
It's hard to say because I'm the creator of them. So, but whenever I raced towards the end, I was using McKellen Chill 3 pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's definitely a good way to sort of even it out.
So the tilt.
Yes. So, and I'll be honest, because like, I don't know if other people do this, but when I've listened to the podcast in the past, I have like at times been like, how would I answer this question? Or what would I have said to this? And especially with tilt, because you ask everyone. And there was a time, especially like when I first started listening, when I was like, I'm going to come up with this amazing answer. And Fear's going to be like, oh my gosh, that's great. And people are going to be posting in chat about it. And I'm going to be like, I don't have a good answer. You know what my answer is? I deal with tilt like shit. I'm not that good at it. I get tilted, and I just hope that it doesn't come across too badly on the stream, and I feel bad for the people in my chat. It sucks. I do stuff bad. The only thing I try to do is not let it impact how I interact with my opponent. That's the only thing. That's the only thought I have.
I think that's huge. Honestly, that's huge because the worst thing you can do is shit on your opponent.
Totally.
I think that's literally the worst thing you can do, where you try to steal joy from whatever they did, right? Whether they got lucky, whether they just flat out beat you, does not matter. If you're trying to steal their joy, you are in the wrong. Like that's just it.
Sucks. And it's like, because if they're better than you, great. I could have won and I screwed something up. Well, guess what? They were better than me to begin with. If they weren't better than me, then they just got to win. That at some point, I've beaten people that I believed, and in many cases still believe, are better than I am. And my reaction is like, holy crap. I can't believe I got, that's awesome. I'm so excited. Like, the worst thing, is for someone to kind of crap on that and bring you down. So that's the only thing. And I will say, what I try and do is, at least in the moment, in communicating with them, I don't want to just be like, and I actually think this is a very good habit for a lot of people, to be like, hey, if I can't say anything nice, I'm just going to step away. And I think that's a really, really good, mature attitude. But I do like talk, I think the thing that I enjoy the most about this community is the other people. So I do want to talk to them. So that is hard sometimes, but I try to say, at least in my calm with the other person, just try and be happy. And if I'm being, I will literally, I've had times when my teeth hurt after a race because I was gritting them so hard by the end. I was so frustrated, but you know what? That's my problem. That's not their problem. Talk to, give them props, ask them about the seed. Some people don't want to chat anyway.
Yeah.
You know what? They don't. And cool. That is a totally legitimate perspective. But if they do, I don't want to be the guy that was just GG and left. Because for some newer runners, it's also they're like, oh my gosh, I'm super pumped. What happened here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for, one, coming on the show, and two, willing to go a little bit longer than normal. No,
I'm fair. Like I said, I can't keep my mouth shut, but thank you for having me. This is I think of the 216 podcast as maybe, I should have said I love these resources. Getting again, the people are the awesome thing, and 216 is a way to feel like you know people better. It's in some ways almost bad, because sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I know so and so. I listened all about them on the podcast. I've never interacted with them. Yeah, that's just how good of a job that you do. So it's
well, I appreciate that.
Incredible. I'm so thankful that you invited me to speak.
All right, huge shout outs to PH. Just loved having him on the show. Just someone that's so easy to talk to. And I think that's what's great about him and makes him, popular in the community, is he just is a good dude and easy to chat with and easy to have in your chat if you're streaming, or to hang out in his stream, or even just to chat up in Discord. Just a good dude. Just really loved having him on the show. Now, here's the thing, is he's back again this week. So there's going to be a bonus episode dropping. I'm not sure which day. Lots of bonus episodes have been happening on the show. What can I say? I'm having a really good time. This bonus episode, though, has nothing to do with any sort of drama or negativity, except we're going to talk a lot of shit. So coming up later this week, we are going to draft the Legend of Zelda series with Timp, Mooglecharm, Allison, and today's guest, PH. What does that mean? Well, come back and listen when it's released later this week. We had a blast. If it's well received, I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, just because they're silly and fun and have no real weight to them. They're just a good time. And it's a chance to have multiple people on the show. Look for that later this week. We'll also have a poll up to see who wins the draft. Again, that will all be explained on that podcast coming out, let's say Thursday. Probably Thursday. But make sure you come back Monday, because we're going to have Chex Human on the show. And I'm just on this string of good people in the community. When you talk about good people, just that people want to be around and have nothing bad to say about, Chex is right there with them. He's the best. So make sure you are subscribed to the show so you don't miss out on any of the stuff that's coming up, the draft or Chex Human or Telethar after that. 216pod.com has a link to the Discord. That's where most of the discussions happen. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're available everywhere. If you could leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that would help the show. Really appreciate all the new listeners. The ones that came for the council interview and stuck around, I really appreciate that. And if you made it all this way, just want to say thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. All right, come back later this week, probably Thursday, for that draft episode. And then again, Chex on Monday. See you then.